Hollywood has a very long history of shutting out certain communities and then also depicting people of color very stereotypically. And Native Americans, for so long, were depicted as brutal savages who had to be stopped by the American heroes of the West. Even still today, we don't have great Native American representation on screen, although Hollywood has fortunately reckoned with their very racist past towards American Indians. 1973, The Godfather comes out. It is remarked as the greatest film of the year, with the greatest performance of the year of Marlon Brando playing the title character. Rumor has it that, without doubt, Marlon Brando is going to win the Oscar for Best Actor.
The winner is Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
But what he did instead was he wrote a speech and he gave it to an Apache actress and a Native American activist named Sacheen Littlefeather. And he gave her this speech and he told her, you will probably only have about a minute before they try to arrest you or something. And she went up on stage and declined the Oscar on Marlon Brando's behalf.
I'm representing Marlon Brando this evening, and he has asked me to tell you in a very long speech, which I cannot share with you presently because of time, but I will be glad to share with the press afterwards, that he very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee. I beg at this time that I have not intruded upon this evening, and that we will, in the future, our hearts and our understandings will meet with love and generosity. Thank you on behalf of Marlon Brando.
Let's get into why this happened and then what happened afterwards. So at the time, not only was Marlon Brando trying to call attention to the unjust treatment of American Indians by Hollywood, he was also wanting to draw attention to Wounded Knee. So back in 1890, there was a massacre that happened, now called the Wounded Knee Massacre. 300 American Indians were murdered by the U.S. government. Fast forward to 1973, and there was a 71-day standoff that was happening during this time as the Oscars were occurring in order to bring light to the unjust treatment of American Indians by this country and to fight for American Indian rights. And Marlon Brando was famously one of the rare celebrities to be involved with political and social issues. Let's take a look at him talking about why he did what he did.
If you had the Academy Awards night to do over again, would you do any of that differently?
I don't think so, no. I felt that there was an opportunity, since the American Indian hasn't been able to have his voice heard in the history of the United States, I felt that it was a marvelous opportunity for an Indian to be able to voice his opinion to 85 million people. I guess that was the number. I felt that he had a right to, in view of what Hollywood has done to him. I was embarrassed for Sacheen. She wasn't able to say what she intended to say. I don't think that people generally realize what the motion picture industry has done to the American Indian. As a matter of fact, all ethnic groups. So when someone makes a protest of some kind and says, please don't present the Chinese this way, or it just goes on and on and on, and people actually don't realize how deeply these people are injured by seeing Indians represented as savage, as ugly, as nasty, vicious, treacherous, drunken. They grow up only with a negative image of themselves, and it lasts a lifetime. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah. Did you expect the kind of outrage that you got from people, I believe, that very night? Who's the Western star? Clint Eastwood, yes. He did his version of a joke, and then John Wayne looked like he was about ready to get a posse together. He looked so sore. Did that surprise you, that they would be angered?
I wasn't surprised, no.
He's like, I wasn't surprised. I've worked with these guys. Why do you think that I'm doing what I'm doing? Clint Eastwood and John Wayne were two of the most outspoken racists and the biggest Western movie stars.
The booing made me sore.
Well, actually, I think the people were booing at me. You're ruining our fantasy with the intrusion of a little reality, and I suppose it was perhaps unkind of me and to do that, but there was a larger issue, and it's an issue that nobody in the motion picture industry has ever addressed themselves to.
It's so wild to think that this was the 70s, right? Racism was still so widely accepted and was not something that people were conscious about. They referenced a couple of reactions to Sacheen Littlefeather getting up there, and I'm going to play a couple of them just to show you guys how openly white actors in Hollywood mocked this kind of thing. Here's Raquel Welch, R.I.P. She recently died. She is presenting Best Actress.
The winner is...
Hope they haven't got a cause.
She goes, hope they haven't got a cause, because right before this was Sacheen Littlefeather taking the stage. This was the viewpoint, though, held by a lot of white actors in the industry, where you don't get up here and make a statement for a cause. These are the Oscars. This is about acting. You don't get up there and make this about you being oppressed. And then here is Clint Eastwood.
I don't know if I should present this award on behalf of all the cowboys shot in all the John Ford Westerns over the years.
R.I.P. Bozo. I mean, he's still alive, but people were pissed. They were really angry. And of course, one person in particular who was not just angry, but attempted to physically remove Sacheen Littlefeather from the stage was John Wayne. John Wayne was famously a white supremacist. He literally said, "I believe in white supremacy." There's an infamous Playboy interview. So during this interview, there were numerous instances where he made extremely bigoted remarks. He was very open about his white supremacist views. It makes sense that it's been a topic of conversation about removing statues and other things that are in honor of John Wayne, including the John Wayne Airport. They bring John Wayne's son on to discuss this because this is a big deal, right? Like having his father's name removed from the airport.
Ethan, this is some real tough stuff. I don't know that you're going to try to defend the words, but let's at least let folks see what they were relative to
I already
gays.
know he's
Can
going
we start
to.
with that? Your father quoted in Playboy magazine, if we can put that on the screen, as saying the following: Americans will be completely fed up with these perverted films. He's then asked, well, what do you consider perverted? He talks about Midnight Cowboy,
Oh, yeah,
a
he was
story
also
about two
homophobic.
fags, thinks that qualifies. Relatives to blacks, people of color, but we can't all of a sudden get down on our knees and turn everything over to the leadership of the blacks. I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility. And then with regard to Native Americans, one more of these, I don't feel we did wrong in taking this great country away from them. If that's what you're asking, our so-called stealing of this country from them was just a matter of survival. There were great numbers of people who needed new land, and the Indians were selfishly trying to keep it for themselves. And I did read the full interview because I didn't want to take anything out of context. Respond to that.
I mean, those aren't exactly statements that could possibly be out of context, you know?
Thank you for having me on and letting me respond. I think you do have to go to the context of that entire interview. This is an interview that took place over 2 days, and I believe the transcript was about 8 hours long. I don't think anybody had a closer relationship to the Native Americans than John Wayne. He's being asked pointedly political questions about an issue that we've dealt with for a century and a half before my father gave the interview, and we're still dealing with it today.
It reminds me of when Donald Trump was like, nobody, what did he say? He's like, nobody likes has a better relationship with the blacks than me. Sure, John Wayne was close to the Native Americans in the sense that he frequently murdered them in Western films. Interesting, because he is doing PR damage control on his father's legacy because that's his father, and so that is, I guess, by proxy, his legacy as well. I really think that this was the wrong idea, right? If I'm his son, I acknowledge that my father was a racist. Like, him just trying to go through all the bad things his father said and debunk them or point to why, in fact, his dad's words were taken out of context, it's just not working because it's so obvious that his words weren't taken out of context and these were the things that he said. And again, he tried to violently remove Sacheen Littlefeather from the stage, from the Oscar stage. I saw a couple of you mention that Sacheen Littlefeather, her Native American ancestry has been called into question. Specifically, her two biological sisters have claimed that she was not actually Native American. Her not actually having Native American ancestry is kind of whack. All that aside, what happened in the aftermath of her delivering that speech was what was important. And so there was a lot done to smear her as a person rather than address the statements that she had made, right? So what happened was 2022, half a century, 50 years after this Oscars, they actually issued a formal apology. The Academy issued an apology to Sacheen Littlefeather. The Academy basically put on this big celebration to celebrate not just Native people, but all peoples who have been unfairly and unjustly treated by the film industry. So everyone who's not white. And they put on this big celebration, and Sacheen Littlefeather appeared. And then a month later, she died. It's pretty amazing that literally right before her death, and she died at 75, which is fairly young still. Right before her death was when she finally received an apology for the abuses that she endured. It is sad that it took 50 years, right? One of the things that I want y'all to take away is how important representation is in film, right? And for so long, for so many years, for really the majority of Hollywood's existence, representation, fair and true representation, has been limited to white people seeing white actors and white stories on screen. Which is why I talk so much about film, but also the history of an awards show like the Oscars, because of how interconnected it is with politics, right? Like there is no separation of politics from film and film from politics, and the impact that film has had on the way that people in this country view people of color and people from marginalized communities. That's why I do consider the Oscars a very important award show, because of how many historic moments have happened there. And there are people who go, it's an awards show. Don't turn this into a wokeism moment. But especially back then, millions and millions and millions of Americans, and particularly white Americans, watched the Oscars. And it was the first time that they were subjected to hearing these perspectives. Unfortunately, throughout history, it often takes a white person who has a stage, who has power and influence, to get up there and draw attention to an issue that non-white people experience. The slap was not the worst thing to happen in Oscars history. I would say it was John Wayne trying to kill Sacheen Littlefeather as she got up on stage to talk about the historical injustice against American Indians.